Joining us from Fort Lauderdale in Florida, I'd very much like to bring in Republican strategist Ed Pozzuoli. Thanks very much for being with us. We've been talking with Doug Herbert about the overall impressions from the speech, the messaging. Is this what you wanted to hear from your new president?
Very much so. This was not candidate Trump. This was President Trump, America's commander-in-chief. Very presidential. He called for unity, and he called for Congress to act on tax reform, bring corporate monies that are offshore back into the United States to use to drive our economy and opportunity to grow jobs. He called for tax reform for the middle class. He called for deregulation. Many of his actions over the last 35 days have been directed at ginning up our economy. Those are promises he made during the campaign, and those are promises he's trying to keep. With respect to Obamacare, he clearly outlined what we know as Paul Ryan's plan, which is essentially taking the government mandate piece of Obamacare and removing it and replacing it with market forces that would allow people to maintain their doctor relationships, to lower premiums, and to decrease taxes, and to buy the plan that they specifically need. And so this is about economic choices and economic growth. And I think President Trump was very presidential and very clear on his intent tonight.
Ed, it's Doug Herbert here. Donald Trump's team would agree with every word you just said. They were very, very positive about this speech right after he finished giving it. But look, you know as well as I, a president can't rule just through executive orders, which is largely what we've seen him do in his first 39 days. And has he changed minds? Have you seen the beginning of him changing minds? Because unless he can get his legislative agenda through Congress and get them working together, he's not going to be moving anywhere.
Well, he was clear during the campaign that some of President Obama's actions by executive order were unconstitutional, and I agree. So President Trump took some measured steps through executive orders that were clearly within the fours of his power. However, you're right. Tax reform, the repeal and replace of Obamacare, and some other actions like funding the border, increasing border measures, security-wise, the wall, et cetera, have to be appropriations from the American Congress. And tonight, it was very much a call to action. Remember, the Congress, both Senate and the House of Representatives, is controlled by Republicans. So Republicans control the fate of both the Trump agenda and what is now a Republican agenda in the United States.
If I can just mention in terms of the executive orders, we ought to mention that the immigration executive order that was brought in was in fact struck down by a series of judges. So just to add that point, I wanted to move on though, Mr. Pozzuoli, to hear part of what Donald Trump said about the military, which was of course one of the big news themes from America of this week. We can take a listen to a soundbite now.
I am sending Congress a budget that rebuilds the military, eliminates the defense sequester, and calls for one of the largest increases in national defense spending in American history. The challenges we face as a nation are great, but our people are even greater, and none are greater or braver than those who fight for America in uniform.
I just come back to Ed Pozzuoli, who's joining us from Fort Lauderdale. I don't think many people listening to what we just heard from Donald Trump in that soundbite would disagree with the idea of believing in their country, believing in the future. There was a real lack of specifics in this speech, however. Do you, as a Republican supporter, feel that this quite broad brushstrokes approach to messaging in this speech was enough for a joint address to Congress, lawmakers in front of him?
Oh, very much so. There were a lot of details in there. He laid out a budget today that included increase in military spending. He's taking a page out of Ronald Reagan's book where it's peace through strength. I think that was clear. He gave clear direction to Congress about what he expected, the basic tenets around how he wanted to replace Obamacare. He also made it clear to Americans that those who had pre-existing health conditions, as an example, he wanted a replacement plan that would continue to cover them. And so he also, by the way, there was one other piece I wanted to mention to you. The immigration order, I would expect to see a new immigration order revised immigration order coming out in the next couple of days that will take into account some of the criticisms that what I consider to be the most liberal court in the country had against the original order. So I think you're going to see President Trump and his administration try again. To the underpinnings of that is to protect Americans from those who have come from places that we cannot vet appropriately.
Ed, final thing here from Doug. Devil's advocate, I want to ask you. Okay, so Trump was reined in, perhaps. He sounded more presidential in this speech. He stuck to script. He stuck to teleprompter. How do we know when he walks out of that room, as he did a few hours ago, he's not going to go back to the tweets, back to the sort of unscripted, I don't want to use the word tirade, but unscripted attacks on the press and anyone else who criticizes him?
Well, I don't think you're going to keep Donald Trump off the tweets. Let's understand that Twitter is a communication method of today. He wants to talk directly to the millions and millions of followers he has on Twitter and social media. So I doubt we're going to see a change to that. What I'm hoping to see is that he stays on his agenda, which is lowering taxes, repeal and replace of Obamacare, revving up the American economy, and strengthening our military. I think those are some keys that I hope he stays on message.
All right, thanks so much, Ed Pozzuoli, Republican strategist, joining us there from Fort Lauderdale in Florida. Thanks very much for your time. Thanks also to Doug Herbert, our international affairs editor.
Thank you.